George, how you doing? Welcome back.
Awesome, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back, James.
Yeah, you bet. So RavenQuest, you've just announced quite the significant supply agreement with Wayland Group. Tell me about that, how that all came about, and what's the positive for Wayland Group? What's the positive from RavenQuest shareholders?
You know, I think what's happened here is people starting to realize that our developed technology, our approach to business, obviously our B2B sales license, the opportunity to be a part of our company and our product offering really created some interest in several LPs, but really created a sort of a 1 + 1 = 5 for us and for Wayland Group, was that we already had a good relationship with each other. We had been talking about other opportunities in the past. But what it really does for us is it provides our company with certainty that we have a revenue stream for 2019. But more importantly, we are part of a process that allows Wayland to reach out and get product to market, which they need so badly and the Canadian market needs so badly.
Right. Okay. So great. So you're now RavenQuest business model. The last time we spoke, you were in the business of helping First Nations become LPs. Is that still the source of this cannabis for the Wayland Group? Is it an Aboriginal First Nations group, or is it some other source?
This source is actually from our two facilities that we have. Our facility that's in Markham, Ontario, and our facility that's in Edmonton. But our Aboriginal or First Nations or Indigenous people group is still moving forward rapidly, lots of conversations. What we're hearing a lot in the Indigenous space is these communities are starting to move to writing their own Cannabis Act. So a slight little bit of concern when they go through that, but all of our projects in those space are moving forward in a positive manner.
Interesting. So when you say that First Nations groups are writing their own cannabis legislation, does that suggest that on First Nations territory they don't recognize the Cannabis Act?
No, it's not that they don't recognize the Cannabis Act. What they're suggesting is that if they write their own Cannabis Act on their sovereign land, that potentially they can control all of the taxation, all of the sovereignty of the product, and move the product as they see and wish to within Canada from nation to nation, maybe more importantly from Indigenous community to Indigenous community on a worldwide basis.
Aha, okay, well that makes perfect sense. Why give the taxes to the government up in Ottawa when you can keep it in the government on your own land? I like that. Sometimes I wish I was born First Nations, but so that's great. Well then, so tell me about your operations in Markham and Edmonton, or what sort of footprint have you got, and what's sort of the operational strategy there?
Okay, so in Markham, Ontario, we're 20,000 square feet. We're flat table, but we will be converting those over to our Orbital Gardens strategy probably in the middle of next year. But our facility in Edmonton is 35,500 square feet with 336 Orbital Gardens in place through 2019. We currently have 142 gardens ready to start cultivating. So it's a footprint, but this footprint will create about 11,000 kilograms. So going back to our last discussion, the smallest footprint with the highest output in yield, the lowest cost of power consumed, 70% less water consumed, and more importantly, 90% less nutrients. So it's a really attractive business model on our side as far as cost. But more importantly, it has an environmental and sustainability plan, which many organizations love to be a part of.
Interesting. Tell me about these Orbital Gardens.
Well, the last time we talked, it was a real cool strategy in where the actual plants rotate around a light down the center of a tube. So imagine a drum with a light down the tube, and then the plants orbiting or going around that garden. What it does is the plants naturally stunt. So they grow to about 14 or 16 inches tall. But since the plants are so close to the light source, we get a max amount of yield from 2,400 watts of power. Normally, that same yield would come from about 8 to 10,000 watts of power. That's largely due to how closely the plants are to the light source. But since they're so short, one, they don't use as much water. And any water that they don't use, we recollect and we put nutrients back into it and re-pH the water. But more importantly, since they're so short, what it allows us to do is feed them less because they don't need as much nutrient through some of the plant leaf and some of the plant material that is essentially just thrown out. So imagine a 4-foot plant versus a 14-inch plant. how much nutrient does it really take to get up to the bud? Well, it's very small because it only has to go up a 14-inch stalk and set itself into the bud structure.
Interesting. Well, that's fascinating, George. We're going to have to send a camera crew out to see these Orbital Gardens.
I hope you will. I think it's going to be really cool for everyone to see.
Yeah, great. Okay. So apart from this excellent Wayland Group deal, what other big things are going to happen in 2019 for Raven's Quest?
You know, I think we've got a lot of very interesting things that we're looking at right now. You know, since we have this out of the way for ourselves, we can start focusing on some other things that we've had in our tactical plan, such as how do we move on formulation development, or even buying formulation technology so that we're ready for October 2019 or maybe sooner, when derived products are going to be allowed under the new Health Canada Cannabis Act. I think more importantly, we can start taking a look at what we have already developed and working on today, which is our craft cannabis groups that we want to start working with and be a part of their success. And lastly, we still have a lot of, let's call it applicants that are coming to us to really look at what is the best way to move forward. So on our consulting and management services side, we're starting to get a lot of traction with people saying, your technology is interesting, your approach to business is interesting, how can we be a part of RavenQuest, and how can you be a part of us? So I think that's the 2019 is continuing to build out the cultivation model, continue to build out the model on formulation, and making sure that we have enough products, not only in dried cannabis, but in derived products, whether that be vape pens, beverages, or whatnot. We have a plan going forward. So we're working on that in 2019, and hopefully very soon we can make some announcements in those areas.
Sounds great, George. Well, I'm going to look forward to spending more time looking at Raven's Quest and coming out with a cameraman, so we'll keep that conversation going. When do you think would be a good time for us to come out there?
I'm hoping that you can come out January.
Okay.
I think that by that time we'll have the license in place, and we're having big events on there January 15th and 16th with a bunch of other stakeholders that are coming out to just take a look at the facility. And it would be great that if the cannabis is rotating around there, to have you and your team there.
We'd love to be there. I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks again for having me. It's been wonderful again.
You bet, George. Bye for now.